We fucked up big time. Pardon my English, and I'll tell you why. Think of it like this. You're a parent, husband, wife, doesn't matter, mother, father, and you have a couple of kids. You have a room in the house where you tell the kids, it's totally off limits all the time. There's nothing secret in the room. It's just a couple things you like and you don't want the kids to mess it up. For example, you have, a puzzle in there. You're working on a big puzzle, right? Imagine you built this puzzle. You spend months and months building this puzzle, right? A beautiful puzzle, one of the nicest puzzles you've ever seen. And then what ends up happening is you take your hands and you say very gently, the puzzle's on the table, I want to split the puzzle in half. It doesn't have to be exactly in half, but what do? You normally, if it's on a wooden table or glass table, whatever it is, you put the pieces of the puzzle slowly, you separate them slowly if you want to just, generally split them in half. But then your kids come running in and they smash the puzzle all over the place. Why do I say that? In this example, in this metaphor or analogy, we as humans are the kids and the parents are the extraterrestrials. Why do I say that? Now, the atom bomb, we made a big mistake deploying it and letting it explode. I understand that. Everybody understands that, right? I don't need to tell you folks that. However, here's the thing. There are substructures, subatomic structures within splitting the atom that what ended up happening was it caught the attention of extraterrestrials, as we all know, right? Ramping up of UFO sightings at nuclear facilities and things like this, even though the Germans were already working on things with them at this time. However, the aliens, from the perspective of the parents, said, oh, Jesus, the kids learned how to smash the puzzle. Now, you might be saying, Dave, why did you give the example of you wanting to, as a parent, wanting to split the puzzle? You're not even supposed to split it to begin with. There you go. That's the answer right there. We're not supposed to split the atom to begin with because there are subatomic structures within the atom that at the time as humans, even at a secretive level, we did not understand. Therefore, those subatomic structures that have also been proven to be re-engineered within graphene and magnesium picked up off of these UFO craft that make up the UFO craft, and in some cases some of these gray aliens are so precise and curated that I can absolutely see how splitting the atom literally caused a ripple in other dimensions. And I say that because literally we didn't know that there are subatomic, I guess you could say, compositions of other interdimensional and introversive capabilities at an esoteric level. Now, today's episode is called The Tranquility Base, synchronizing lunar-wave holograms to demagnetize psychokinetic skull broadcasting, in brackets, the 9 unknown men. Folks, I gotta tell you, this is a very exciting episode, but before I do that, I want to personally thank, from the bottom of my goddamn heart, everyone who reached out to me and assisted and even just offered to assist for me on my road trip. I'm back in the studio. There will be consistency returning to the show, and I will not have this issue again. Folks, guys, I gotta say, evil goat god, there's so many people that reached out. I don't even know where to start. I don't have the time. With that being said, thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. At the same time, for those that are just watching this episode fresh and new, we do have a Patreon. It does help support the show. Please, by all means, give it a shot. And also, this episode is sponsored by Black Oxygen Organics as well too. I will be getting into some more details about that later on. However, let's jump right into it. So first, let's understand this right here. This is slaveplanet.net. Moon's shadow like a ship creates waves in Earth's atmosphere. Okay, Moonwave explained and hologram theory put in its place. Like a gigantic boat plying the heavens, the moon's shadow creates waves in Earth's atmosphere that travel at more than 200 miles per hour, a new study reveals. This effect was predicted back in the early 70s, but researchers were only finally able to observe it during the total solar eclipse of July 22nd, 2009. Oh yeah, I'm sure they waited that long, I'm sure. Anyways, the researchers discovered that acoustic waves, also known as sound waves, in Earth's upper atmosphere pile up along the leading and trailing edges of the moon's shadow as it moves across the Earth, like the waves produced when a ship plows through water. Okay. Why is that so significant? Well, there's the proposal that, lunar waves do indirectly and directly affect that of people's energies and esotericism and mood, mentality, emotions on Earth. However, there's an even deeper substance to all of this. If we take a look at this right over here, ancientorigins.net, the 9 unknown men. Now, for those that have been with the show for over a year, you'll know that I did do an episode on this, but I do believe it's time we revisit it. The 9 unknown men, an ancient Indian secret society. Now, I don't want to say that this is exclusive just to India. And the reason I say that, folks, is because when we take a look at some of the apparitions and some of the ways in which some of these 9 unknown men seem to have disseminated some of the architecture and literature within that of what they're describing, a tribute to that of psychokinetics and lunar waves, it's very clear that this transcends that of any subhuman culture, right? Whether, subhuman culture meaning China, India, Chinese people, Indian people, Russian people, French people, you name it, right? You name African people, you name it, right? Asian. Now, if we take a look here, the 9 unknown men were known to, very much like the Majestic 12, pass on to their to their successors this information, and this holds secrets to esotericism, ancient knowledge, and things like that. We can also substantiate that by Leonid Ivashov's book, and those that are members on the Patreon will know how much we've been talking about this in the Zoom calls previously with regards to world governments staging wars, creating problems, but also creating the solution in order to not just profit in a financial and monetary sense, but also to go after ancient esoteric technology. Now, let's take a look at this right here, thefreedictionary.com. Psychokinesis, what does it mean? Let's break it down very strongly, very fundamentally. The production or control of motion, especially in inanimate and remote objects, purportedly by the exercise of psychic powers, end quote. Psychokinesis, very simple. Control things with your mind, right? Telepathy, you name it. Now, let's take a look at this right here. blog.worldmysteries.com. Not exactly a mainstream media website. Mind control, voice-to-skull technology, okay? Brain science, I'm not going to cover what we see up here because it could get us banned on this episode, but that's why we have the Patreon. Anyways, brain science from bench to battlefield, the realities and risks of neural weapons. Okay, Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory Center for Global Security Research, CGSR, sponsored this talk entitled Brain Science from Bench to Battlefield, the Realities and Risks of Neural Weapons by Dr. James Giordano. Okay, now take a look at this right here. The use of sarin gas in Syria and the nerve agent to assassinate Kim Jong-nam, and ongoing efforts in brain science by both nations and non-state actors, inclusive of a growing community of do-it-yourself biohacker scientists, prompt renewed interest in the current and near-term possibilities of developing and employing neuro weapons. Okay? End quote. Now, what we do know is that telepathy is real. I'm not saying this as, it is a fact. There is quite a bit to cover. And why do I say that? Well, if we take a look at some of the leaked ATIP slides, what we're going to find here is that, take a look. Again, this is what the classified UFO report said to top leaders of Congress and certain senators of certain committees. The science exists for an enemy of the United States. Again, notice how they always have to frame it as an enemy. But anyways, to manipulate both physical and cognitive environments in order to penetrate U.S. facilities, influence decision makers, and compromise national security. Look at the points, folks, of what they say can be done. I know we've covered this before, particularly within the members episodes, but you're going to see tomorrow, members, or later on this evening, depending on when we finish editing it, some more leaked papers that pertains to some of the child traffic. But anyways, psychotronic weapons, cognitive human interface, penetration of solid surfaces, walking through walls. It's real. It's legit. Instantaneous sensor disassembly, alteration, manipulation of biological organisms. Programmable matter, anybody? Seriously. Anomalies in the space-time construct. Okay, holograms, portals, that's basically it. And unique cognitive human interface experiences. You know what that means? If they want to target somebody, they could do it. I'm not saying the aliens, because if they wanted to, they would have done it on a mass level by now. Maybe they have. Let's be real. Let's be fair. Maybe they have. However, I'm more concerned about humans having this technology, right? Anyways, look at this right here at the bottom. What was considered a phenomena is now quantum physics. Quite interesting, isn't it, right? Now, let's take a look at this right here. Workshopinsider.com. Let's understand demagnetization, because, of course, the title, Synchronizing Lunar-Wave Holograms to Demagnetize Psychokinetic Skull Broadcasting, is exactly what's occurring here. Why do I say that? The overall concept of this episode, folks, is to explain that ley lines or lee lines, however you pronounce them, and you will see that with the long-form upcoming episode that I recently did with Mark Steves as well, too, which is a phenomenal interview. You will notice, folks, that ley lines are being purposefully demagnetized by that of the Regalions, allegedly, a certain faction of the reptilians working with the United States government in an effort to not allow the everyday person to have these type of abilities, because now what's happening is mass consciousness by nature is waking up, and these elites do not have control. Why? Because they're being instructed by the beings above them to have to release this, to disseminate this. Like I said, I've always said, I do believe, I could be wrong, but I do believe the elites are in a position where they're very paranoid. They are comfortable, don't get me wrong. They still have their money and all that, but they're paranoid of the collapse of the hierarchical structure of everything. Again, I'm not trying to be like some guy saying, oh, you know, the savior's coming, the world's going to get better. I'm not saying it will. I'm not saying it won't. With that being said, let's take a look. Ferromagnetic materials usually retain some residual magnetism after the magnetizing process. Again, if you demagnetize something once, especially ley lines all around the world disseminating and protruding from that of a living, breathing organism known as Earth, very hard to suppress, right? Because if you kill the Earth, then you can't live on it anymore, even as an elite. That's the thing. So it takes time, excuse me. And I quote, as previously discussed, the amount of magnetizing force initially applied and retentivity of the material will determine the amount of residual magnetism. Okay? Complete demagnetization is difficult, if not impossible, to obtain. Hence, the demagnetization process is limited to reduce the residual field to an acceptable level. End quote. Interesting, isn't it? You see the suppression of the way in which why the elites would be scared. Let's take a look at this right here. Why is demagnetization needed? Very good question, right? Let's see what it says here. Demagnetization may be necessary for the following reasons. The part will be used where a residual magnetic field will interfere with the operation. Again, we are the operation. We having these natural abilities, these psychokinetic abilities, interferes with the elite's operation. The part will be machined and chips may adhere to the surface being machined. Okay, I mean, I got to be careful because of what's going on in the world with microchips and speculation right now. But you know where I'm going to go with that. We'll touch on that in the members more. Foreign particles may attract to the magnetized part and cause mechanical damages during operations. The part will be welded and arc blow may be caused due to the residual magnetic fields. End quote. Now, what's interesting as well too is that if we understand what arc blows are, we're going to find that it's going to lead us to this right over here. TechExplore.com. Stanford University could pave the way to ultra-fast energy efficient computing. Interesting how energy efficient computing's okay, but energy efficient cars, energy efficient this or that is not, right? And the reason for this is right here. Scientists have spent decades looking for more energy efficient, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, sure. It's been suppressed by the exact same universities that these scientists fund. Again, Stanford University engineers have overcome a key obstacle that has limited widespread adoption of phase change memory. The results are published in a September 10th study in Science. Okay. Talks about electrical resistance, end quote. Here's the problem the elites from the human level, in my opinion, are having. With regards to electrical resistance, you're now speaking on that of the Germans, with regards to Nazi Germany and the Vril Society, and how UFOs or alien craft use magnetization to propel themselves off the surface of a particular orbit relative to being within that planet's atmosphere, right? It's magnetism. It's magnets. Gravity is magnets, right? Take a look at this. InterestingEngineering.com. A new Navy weapon actually stops you from talking. Look at that. The U.S. Navy has successfully invented a special electronic device that is designed to stop people from talking. A form of non-lethal weapon, the new electronic device effectively repeats a speaker's own voice back at them and only them while they attempt to talk. Yeah, new. Okay, yeah, I'm sure. It was developed and patented back in 2019, but has only been recently discovered according to a report by the New Scientist, end quote. Folks, if they can cover this stuff up, you're telling me things, for example, like with what's going on with the Epstein case, they can't cover that type of stuff up? I don't mean to just jump all over the place, but let's just take a look at some of the realistic examples. Take a look at this right here. economictimes.indiatimes.com. Did Nazis produce these uranium cubes? Researchers look for an answer. The failure of Nazi Germany's nuclear program is well established in the historical record. Not exactly a failure, if you folks, especially on Patreon, know what I'm talking about. What is less documented is how a handful of uranium cubes, possibly produced by the Nazis, ended up at laboratories in the United States. End quote. Okay, the rest of that article, in my humble opinion, I could be wrong, it's propaganda because it's going based off of false history. The uranium cubes are used for the demagnetization of the ley lines. Don't kid yourself, folks. They know exactly what's going on here. Okay, with that being said, I want to quote something from a transcript that was posted on Facebook about Eric Weinstein, the gentleman who developed the disk theory, a distributive idea suppression complex. Basically saying there's not a full-on coordinated conspiracy within the academic community to suppress certain knowledge, but that there's a loose one, okay? And he says here, asked about scientific progress in 50 years, Eric replied, what the heck happened to physics is the really interesting question. I'll tell you what happened to physics, Eric. Respectfully, sir. Aliens. It's true. Why? Physics had to be suppressed because of what they were discovering, because it was going to disseminate to the public domain of things, right? And I will continue to quote Mr. Weinstein. The last person, the youngest person to really contribute to the standard model, turned 70 this year. So there are no young women or men who've contributed to the standard model under the age of 70. And that loss of physics, I don't think people understand how catastrophic it is. End quote. At least on the surface level, I would agree with Mr. Weinstein. I'd say underground, in those deep underground military bases, oh boy, it's a very different situation. Now, take a look at this right here, Egypt, alienshift.com. Take a look at this right here. The pyramids of Giza and the Sphinx. Now, notice this right here. Egypt, land of alien technology. Look at some of these images, folks. And the reason I bring this up is because of this right here. Billy asks, I would like to ask you something regarding the pyramids, which may not be found in Egypt only, but all around the world. Asked once told me that these were originally built under the supervision of ETs. In 1956, she declared that the pyramids were built 2 times 36,650 years back, or 73,300 years back. Since then, 40 years have passed, which means the construction of the pyramids should have taken place 73,340 years back in time. Okay. However, our scientists assert something completely different. They place the time of construction much later in time, about several thousand years before the birth of Jemanuel. All right. End quote. The reason this is brought up is because of the time travel capabilities using psychokinetic skull broadcasting that is infiltrating the minds of everyday people to divert them into the secret space program, as we could say, beyond top secret Texan, who was formerly Rumors of Instinct, will tell you about. I think we're going to be having him back on the show sometime soon. And the reason we know that is because of this right here. BBC.com, climate change, animals shape-shifting to stay cool, study says. If you take a look at this particular article, what you're going to find is not the direct reference, because legally, from a legal end, the lawyers of these mainstream media outlets do not want to get sued, which is why, anyways, they put air quotes around certain things. But what you're going to find here is the dissemination of the evolutionary lens of the way in which these types of birds were able to actually transform in a way over time that was parallel to what occurred with the pyramids. Interesting, isn't it? Now take a look at this right here. Science-news.co. The U.S. Army confirms material analysis of alleged UFO debris. Interesting, isn't it? Why do I say that? Because these materials are the same materials that were allegedly covered up by the Rockefeller Institute that were retrieved from the pyramid shortly before Project ISIS, which was the Russians' operation to try and retrieve an alien tomb from one of the pyramids, as we know quite well, right? Now take a look at this. News.yahoo.com. Mars. NASA rover's rock cores were, quote, highest priority samples, end quote. Those rocks produce some of the most incredible piezoelectricity, allegedly, that would allow for the pyramids to be reinstated, but not in a good way for the masses, more for the elites and the regalions, if you want to call it. Again, I'm not saying the regalions, the species, the gray species, are controlling all of this, but the 1954 Greada Treaty may ascribe and hint at that. With that being said, let's play it neutrally, if you want to call it. These rocks harnessed the strongest piezoelectricity as that of the material within the pyramids. But it's interesting, you might be saying, Dave, weren't the pyramids built out of material here on Earth? Yes, but let's go back to the example I gave at the very beginning of this episode. The subatomic structures within these rocks on Mars were so organized. Like Jacques Vallée said with James Fox on Joe Rogan's show on Spotify, they were so well organized. This can't be a trick of nature, can't be the doing of nature, right? So again, now let's take a look at this right here. RemoteView.com. The key to ideograms are repetition until comfortable, speed, do as fast as possible without thought. This has to do with ideogram drilling with relative to, remote viewing, where you visualize where you are in order to view something, because remote viewing is real. However, take a look at this right here. Winterwatch.net, the Roundup glyphosate toxin scam and conspiracy. Glyphosate has been used by Monsanto quite significantly. And again, Monsanto owns the vast majority of crop fields, at least within the West, within North America. I believe in Europe too. Please don't quote me on that. Forgive me if I don't have I can't ascertain the veracity of it at this very moment. With that being said, glyphosate helps suppress the ley lines. And for those that are on the Patreon as well too, if you remember the last members episode, or the one just before that, the NanoQuell episode. There was a public one, but we got much more into things, looking at documents that Snowden leaked and things like that on the Patreon. You'll find that's the case. You'll see. Now, again, we could speculate as to what that material is, but it wouldn't surprise me if glyphosate was one of them, okay? With that being said, we're going to see here the Carlyle Group on Wikipedia, and we're going to see here This from the debrief.org. Congress calls for permanent office to address unidentified aerial phenomenon. The move represents the first time since 1969 the U.S. government would have a formal office to investigate UFOs, end quote. My humble perspective, folks, again, just a theory, but again, if we bring this full circle, all these connections with regards to the slideshow and all that, the A-Tips leak slides from Christopher Mellon, you name it, this is disseminated, controlled opposition from the proposal of disclosure from the Nordics in an effort to spiritually help ascend those that have fallen into this psychokinetic trap relative to that of the military-industrial complex and the secret space program. In other words, part of my English, it's a clusterfuck. The puzzle I gave at the beginning, the kids didn't just come in and smash it. They flipped the whole table over. Okay, metaphorically. With that being said, this relates back to the 9 unknown men because 2 out of the 9 unknown men had this same prediction made many, many years ago with regards to the way in which things would collapse, which is equally representative of that of a subatomic collapse when you split the atom. With that being said, folks, let me know what you think. We'll catch you soon.